Ryan's office revenge.
I knew my 22-year career was over. The moment Kevin Morrison looked me dead in the eye and said, "You can pick up your Cactus from security when they approve it. Not my laptop, not my desk supplies, not even my coffee mug with the faded Army logo. My Cactus." The little thing I'd kept alive through 2 office moves, 3 company restructures, and 1 particularly brutal winter when the heating system died. He was using it as his final insult, like I was some old guy who couldn't even be trusted with a plant. My name is Brian Thompson. I'm 47, and I'd just been fired by a kid who couldn't code his way out of a paper bag. That plant comment wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was sitting in that glass conference room at 3:30 on a Tuesday afternoon, watching Kevin adjust his expensive tie while explaining how they were restructuring the technology department. The HR woman sat beside him with a folder on her lap, nodding along like she was watching a cooking show. 22 years of building the foundation this company ran on, and it all came down to a 15-minute meeting about cost optimization and legacy positions. "Unfortunately, Brian," Kevin said, not even bothering to maintain eye contact, "some legacy positions won't be compatible with our new direction." Legacy positions. After starting here when Kevin was probably in high school, I was legacy. But here's what Kevin Morrison didn't know about legacy guys like me. We've been around long enough to see the writing on the wall. When a company brings in a 38-year-old operations manager with an MBA from some second-tier school and 0 technical background, guys with gray in their hair become expensive problems to solve. I'd seen it happening for months. The sideways looks during meetings when I'd suggest we stress test a new deployment. The way Kevin would cut me off mid-sentence to ask if there was a more agile approach to problems I'd been solving since before he knew what source code was. The casual comments about bringing in fresh perspectives and optimizing our human capital. Fresh perspectives, human capital, MBA speak for getting rid of anyone old enough to remember when this company actually valued technical expertise. The thing is, I didn't get to where I am by being naive. 22 years in this business teaches you to read the room. And I'd been reading this room for a while. So about 3 years ago, when Kevin first started making noise about efficiency improvements and cost-cutting measures, I began working on something in my spare time. Nothing fancy, just a more efficient way to handle data processing that could cut server costs by about 30%. I built it on my own laptop, after hours, using nothing from the company's codebase. Clean, elegant, and completely independent. The kind of algorithm that looks simple until you try to replicate it, then realize the complexity is in how it makes everything else look effortless. I'd learned something important during my Army years before transitioning to tech. Always have an exit strategy. In the military, they call it contingency planning. In corporate America, I call it insurance. My wife Jennifer had been worried about our financial situation for months. Amanda was starting her 2nd year of medical school at $60,000 a year, and Ryan was a sophomore studying engineering at $35,000 annually. That's $95,000 in tuition alone, not counting room, board, and living expenses. Jennifer's part-time teaching brought in maybe $28,000 a year, which barely covered our grocery budget. We'd been burning through our savings faster than I cared to calculate. My 401k was healthy enough, but touching it early would cost us 30% in penalties and taxes. The plan had always been to work until 65, maybe 62, if we were careful with our spending. Kevin's restructuring had just blown that timeline to hell. But I wasn't panicking the way Kevin probably expected. While he was busy playing corporate politics and impressing the board with PowerPoint presentations full of synergy and optimization buzzwords, I'd been quietly building something that could change our entire situation. The algorithm I developed wasn't just another incremental improvement. It was the kind of breakthrough that comes along maybe once in a career, if you're lucky. The processing efficiency gains were remarkable, but more importantly, it solved problems in ways that would take competitors years to figure out from scratch. I'd filed a provisional patent 3 years ago, not because I planned to sell it, but because I'd learned something over the years. In this business, if you don't protect your ideas, someone else will take credit for them. And Kevin had already proven he was exactly that type. About 18 months ago, I'd mentioned the concept during a casual lunch conversation with one of the other senior engineers. Just theoretical discussion, the kind of shop talk that happens when experienced guys get together. 2 months later, I started seeing elements of my approach showing up in our production systems. Not my exact code, but the methodology, the efficiency improvements, the little optimizations I'd figured out. When I brought it up with our legal department, they basically patted me on the head. "Since you haven't commercialized it independently, it's not really relevant," the company lawyer said, barely glancing up from his laptop. Translation: if it's not making you money, it's not worth our time to protect. That's when I called Timothy Brooks, my old Army buddy who'd gone into intellectual property law after his service. We'd served together for 6 years before I transitioned to tech, and Tim understood 2 things better than most lawyers: how to protect an idea and how to bury a landmine in plain sight. "You wrote this entirely on your own time?" Timothy asked during our first meeting about converting the provisional patent. We were sitting in his downtown office, the kind of place with law books that actually looked like they'd been read and a view of the courthouse across the street. I slid the thick documentation folder across his desk, every single line. On my own equipment, no company resources, completely independent development. I've got timestamps, commit histories, even receipts for the hardware I used. Timothy had always been thorough, even back in our Army days. He flipped through the technical documentation like he was reading a novel, occasionally stopping to make notes in the margins. "Did you write this entirely outside of work hours? Nights, weekends, vacation days?" I logged every hour I spent on it. The development started 3 years ago, long before Kevin even joined the company. "Good, because once we file this, there's no walking it back. You'll own it outright, and if they're already using it..." He let the sentence hang there, but we both knew what it meant. The full patent filing process took 6 months. 6 months of careful language, precise technical descriptions, and legal frameworks that would make the patent bulletproof. Timothy included statements clarifying that any incidental use of the algorithm by other organizations without explicit licensing would constitute infringement. "The language isn't just defensive," he explained during one of our review sessions. "It's offensive. If they try to contest this later, they'll be walking into a legal buzzsaw." While we waited for the patent approval, life at the office became increasingly uncomfortable. Kevin had developed a talent for making me feel invisible without technically doing anything HR could cite him for. He'd schedule critical technical meetings during my lunch breaks, then act surprised when I missed important decisions. He'd assign me to research projects that kept me away from the actual development work, then question why my team was falling behind. The worst part was watching him take credit for improvements that used pieces of my algorithm. During quarterly reviews with the board, Kevin would stand in front of whiteboards covered in my handwriting, explaining innovations in terms so vague that you could tell he didn't understand the underlying technology. "We've optimized our processing efficiency by 28%, he'd announce, gesturing at charts that showed the performance gains my algorithm was providing. "It's all about leveraging synergistic approaches to data management." Synergistic approaches. The man couldn't explain how a for loop worked, but he could sure dress up technical achievements in MBA buzzword salad. Michelle Foster, one of our senior engineers, started giving me updates about the meetings I wasn't invited to anymore. Michelle had been with the company for 12 years, solid engineer, single mom working her way up through the ranks. She was also facing Kevin's cost-cutting scrutiny. "He's building a case," she told me during one of our coffee breaks, "documenting every project delay, every budget overrun, anything that makes the senior staff look inefficient." Building a case for what? Outsourcing. He's been in meetings with firms in India and Eastern Europe. The pitch is that he can cut development costs by 60% while maintaining the same output quality. The irony was thick enough to cut with a knife. Kevin wanted to outsource the very expertise that had built the systems keeping the company profitable. He was so focused on the cost side of the equation that he couldn't see the value side. My patent was officially granted on a Thursday morning in October. Timothy called me at 9:15 a.m. with the news. "It's official," he said, and I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. "Patent number 11847-293, granted to Brian Thompson for efficient data processing algorithm with adaptive resource management. You own it, outright, for the next 20 years. I sat in my cubicle, staring at the email attachment Timothy had sent. There it was in official government letterhead. My name, my invention, my intellectual property. Around me, my co-workers were going about their normal Thursday morning routines, completely unaware that the foundation their paychecks depended on had just shifted dramatically. That afternoon, I started making calls. Sarah Mitchell, VP of Product Development at Tech Advanced Solutions, our biggest competitor, picked up on the second ring. Sarah and I had known each other for years through industry conferences. She was ex-Air Force, sharp as a tack, and she understood the value of good technology when she saw it. "Brian Thompson," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "I've got something you're going to want to see," I told her. "A fully granted patent that covers technology your biggest competitor uses every day without legal rights to it." The interest in her voice sharpened immediately. "I'm listening. Data processing algorithm that cuts server costs by 30%. Granted this morning, completely clean chain of ownership and currently being used without license by Morrison Technologies in every major system they run." There was a pause, then, "Send me everything you've got. I can have our legal team review it within 2 hours." I attached the patent documentation to an encrypted email while we stayed on the line. Sarah was smart enough to understand the implications immediately. If my old company was using patented technology without license, they were in violation. If a competitor secured exclusive rights to that technology, my old company would face massive disruption. "How long have they been using your algorithm?" Sarah asked. "About 18 months in production. It's woven into their core infrastructure. Pull it out, and their back-end processing grinds to a halt. And you're looking to license this exclusively?" "To the right partner, absolutely. Someone who understands its value and can move quickly." We spent the next hour discussing terms in broad strokes. Licensing fees, exclusivity windows, implementation support. Sarah didn't haggle much. She knew an opportunity when she saw one, and she knew that speed mattered. Every hour her legal team spent reviewing documents was another hour my old company might stumble onto what was coming. By the time we hung up, it was after 6 p.m. The office was mostly empty. Just the cleaning crew and a few dedicated engineers working late on projects that would soon become someone else's problem. I packed up my laptop and walked to the parking garage, feeling steadier than I had in months. The chess pieces were finally in position. Sarah's legal team worked faster than I'd expected. By 10 a.m. Friday morning, she called me back with their verdict. "It's clean," she said without preamble. "Completely bulletproof. Your documentation is thorough, the patent language is airtight, and our technical team confirms the algorithm is exactly what you described. And we want it. Exclusive licensing full term. Are you ready to talk numbers?" The negotiation took less than an hour. Sarah understood the strategic value better than I'd hoped. This wasn't just about acquiring good technology. It was about kneecapping their biggest competitor at exactly the right moment. $750,000 up front, she offered, plus 12% royalties on any products or services that incorporate the algorithm. Exclusive licensing for the full 20-year patent term. I did quick math in my head. With Tech Advance's current product line, the royalties alone would generate around $200,000 annually. Over 20 years, assuming modest growth, I was looking at close to $5 million total. "Deal," I said. "Contracts will be in your inbox within 2 hours. We're moving the announcement for Monday morning, 9 a.m. Eastern. That gives us the weekend to finalize everything, and you the weekend to prepare for whatever comes next." Whatever comes next. Sarah knew exactly what was coming next. I spent Saturday morning reviewing the licensing agreements with Timothy. Everything looked perfect. Clear language, fair terms, and legal protections that would make any challenge nearly impossible to win. "Once you sign this," Timothy warned, "there's no walking it back. Monday morning, this becomes public record." "Good," I said, and signed my name in ink that seemed to absorb into the paper fibers. Sunday was quiet. Jennifer and I took a long walk around the neighborhood, talking about what the next few months might look like. The kids were both at school, Amanda deep in her medical studies, Ryan wrestling with thermodynamics and structural engineering. They had no idea their tuition worries were about to disappear. "Are you nervous?" Jennifer asked as we stopped at the little park where we used to bring the kids when they were small. "No," I said, and realized I meant it. "I've been preparing for this for 3 years. Kevin thinks he's been playing chess, but he doesn't even know what game we're really playing." Monday morning came with unusual energy around the office. Kevin had scheduled an all-hands meeting for 10 a.m., something about exciting new directions and strategic initiatives. I had a pretty good idea what kind of strategic initiatives he had in mind. At 9:15, my phone buzzed with a text from Timothy. "Press release is live. Tech Advance just announced exclusive licensing of patent 11847-293. Your name is all over the trade publications. I didn't check the headlines. I didn't need to. The all-hands meeting was held in the large conference room on the second floor, the one with windows that overlooked the parking lot. Kevin stood at the front of the room in his expensive suit, hands clasped behind his back like he was addressing shareholders instead of the engineers who actually built the products. As many of you know, he began, we've been evaluating our operational efficiency and looking for ways to optimize our human capital allocation. Human capital allocation. Even when he was about to destroy people's livelihoods, Kevin couldn't speak like a normal person. After careful analysis, we've determined that some restructuring will be necessary to maintain our competitive edge. This will unfortunately involve some personnel changes. I watched faces around the room. Michelle looked like she was trying not to throw up. Tom Rodriguez, one of our best database architects, was staring at his hands. Everyone knew what was coming, but hearing it made official felt different. Effective today, we'll be transitioning several positions to external partners who can provide the same services at a more cost-effective rate. External partners. Outsourcing to India and Eastern Europe, just like Michelle had warned. Kevin started reading names from a prepared list. Tom Rodriguez, Lisa Anderson from the front-end team, Bill Henderson from infrastructure. All solid engineers with families and mortgages and kids in college. And finally, Kevin said, his voice taking on a tone that sounded almost pleased, Brian Thompson. The room went quiet. 22 years with the company. And my career ended with my name on a termination list read aloud like baseball scores. Brian, Michelle, Tom, Lisa, and Bill. Please report to Conference Room B for individual exit interviews. Walking to Conference Room B felt like walking to an execution. The smaller room had the same glass walls as Kevin's office, putting the whole process on display for anyone who wanted to watch. HR was waiting with folders and forced smiles. My individual session lasted exactly 15 minutes. Kevin sat across from me with that same satisfied expression I'd seen 100 times before, the look that said he'd found another way to remind you who was really in charge. I'm sure you understand this is a business decision, he said, not even pretending to sound sympathetic. Nothing personal. Of course, I replied. You'll have 2 weeks severance, COBRA health insurance options, and standard non-disclosure agreements to sign. I signed everything without reading it. None of it mattered. Anymore. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. Kevin leaned back in his chair, adjusted his tie, and delivered his final insult with the casual cruelty of someone who'd never faced real consequences. Security will escort you out. You can collect your plant when facilities approves it. Your plant. Not even the courtesy of calling it by what it was, a small cactus I'd kept alive for 8 years. He turned it into the punchline of a joke only he found funny. I nodded once, stood up, and walked back to my desk. Around me, the office had gone quiet in that particular way workplaces do when everyone's pretending not to watch a disaster unfold. I packed my laptop into its case, put my army mug in a cardboard box, and left my badge on the desk. The security escort was a young guy who looked embarrassed about the whole thing. Sorry about this, Mr. Thompson, he mumbled as we walked toward the elevator. Don't worry about it, I told him. It's not your fault. In the parking garage, I sat in my car for a moment before starting the engine. Through the concrete walls, I could hear the faint hum of traffic and the distant sound of construction. Normal Monday morning sounds. I checked my phone. 17 missed calls, 43 text messages, and 87 emails. Word was spreading fast. The spring was loaded. Now it was time to let it go. The press release hit the trade publications at exactly 9:42 a.m. Tech Advance Solutions acquires exclusive rights to breakthrough data processing technology. Simple headline, devastating implications. By 10:15, the stock market had noticed. Morrison Technologies shares dropped 3%, then 5%, then kept sliding as investors began connecting the dots. By lunch, we were down 8% with no signs of recovery. I didn't need to be in the office to know what was happening. Michelle started sending me updates via encrypted messages, painting a picture of controlled chaos. Emergency board meeting called for 2 p.m., she texted. Kevin looks like he aged 10 years since this morning. CTO just spent 20 minutes on phone with legal. Lots of shouting. Someone leaked that your name is on the patent. Board members are asking how Kevin let this happen. That last message made me smile. Kevin had been so eager to attach his name to technical innovations that he'd put himself down as a co-inventor on several internal documents related to my algorithm. Now, with the patent exclusively licensed to a competitor, it looked like he'd personally handed over the company's core technology. The media coverage accelerated throughout the afternoon. TechCrunch picked up the story first. Patent dispute rocks Morrison Technologies as competitor secures exclusive rights. By evening, the Wall Street Journal was running analysis pieces about corporate intellectual property theft and the risks of undervaluing senior technical talent. Sarah Mitchell called me around 6 p.m. "How are you holding up?" "Better than expected," I said. "How's the integration?" "Planning going fast. Our technical team is thrilled. They're saying this algorithm could accelerate our development timeline by 18 months. And the exclusivity? Bulletproof. Our legal department confirmed that Morrison Technologies has no claim, no shared rights, no legal standing whatsoever. They've been using your technology without license for 18 months. They're completely exposed." The next morning brought Kevin's first attempt at damage control. Morrison Technologies issued a statement about exploring all legal options and protecting shareholder interests. The language was typical corporate speak, but you could smell the desperation underneath. Timothy called me at 8:30 a.m., laughing. "Did you see Morrison's statement? They're threatening to challenge the patent." "On what grounds?" "That's the beautiful part. They don't have any. Every timestamp, every development log, every piece of documentation proves you built it independently. Their own internal emails show they knew you developed it outside of work hours. What about Kevin's name on the internal documents? That actually makes it worse for them. It creates a paper trail showing they knowingly implemented technology they didn't own, with management approval." The board moved faster than I'd expected. By Thursday, word leaked that Kevin Morrison was under review. Corporate speak for updating his resume. The SEC announced an investigation into potential insider trading violations related to stock transactions Kevin had made the week before the patent announcement. Michelle's updates became more detailed as the week progressed. Kevin missed the executive meeting this morning. First time in 2 years. Legal department is reviewing every project he touched, looking for more IP violations. CFO was overheard saying this could cost us $10 million in licensing fees and lost revenue. HR is interviewing his direct reports, asking about his management style and decision-making process. The final blow came Friday afternoon. Morrison Technologies announced Kevin Morrison's resignation to pursue other opportunities. The same day, they disclosed they were negotiating licensing agreements with Tech Advanced Solutions to continue using my algorithm in their existing systems. Licensing agreements. They went from thinking they owned it to begging for permission to keep using it. The financial impact was immediate and substantial. My first payment from Tech Advance arrived within 72 hours of the announcement. $750,000 direct deposit that changed our family's entire trajectory. Amanda's medical school tuition was secure. Ryan's engineering degree was paid for. Jennifer could stop worrying about our retirement timeline, but the money was just the beginning. Within 2 weeks, I had calls from 3 other companies asking about consulting arrangements. Word travels fast in our industry, and suddenly I was the guy who'd outmaneuvered a Fortune 500 company using nothing but patience and proper intellectual property protection. I founded Wilson Technology Consulting in November, specializing in IP protection for senior engineers who'd been pushed out by cost-cutting managers. The business grew faster than I could handle. Engineers in their 40s and 50s who'd watched younger MBAs undervalue their expertise started reaching out for advice on protecting their innovations. Timothy joined as my legal counsel, and we developed a comprehensive approach to helping experienced engineers monetize their knowledge while protecting themselves from corporate exploitation. Within 6 months, we had more clients than we could serve. The speaking engagements came next. IEEE conferences, technology leadership summits, corporate workshops on intellectual property ethics. I became the poster child for why companies should value experienced engineers instead of treating them as expensive legacy problems. Kevin's story didn't end as well. The SEC investigation led to civil penalties for insider trading. The industry blacklisted him after details emerged about his management practices and the IP violations. Last I heard, he was working at a mid-tier consulting firm for about a third of his Morrison Technologies salary. The best part was a follow-up article in Forbes 6 months later. How one engineer's patent strategy exposed corporate age discrimination. The piece detailed how Kevin's outsourcing plans had specifically targeted engineers over 45, using performance metrics that favored cheaper junior staff over experienced senior architects. A year later, Morrison Technologies settled a class action lawsuit filed by the employees Kevin had terminated. The company paid $4.2 million to workers who could prove age discrimination in their layoffs. As for me, I'm doing exactly what I love, solving technical problems and mentoring younger engineers. Except now I'm doing it on my own terms, with financial security my father's generation could only dream of. The little cactus Kevin tried to turn into an insult? It sits on my home office desk now, bigger and healthier than ever. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. Sometimes it's growing something beautiful from what someone else tried to kill. And sometimes, if you're patient enough and smart enough, you can turn one small slight into complete vindication. Kevin Morrison learned that lesson the hard way. I learned something too. Respect isn't something you can demand or expect. It's something you earn by being strategic enough to turn other people's underestimation into your competitive advantage. 22 years in this business taught me that timing is everything. Kevin thought he was ending my story that Tuesday afternoon. He had no idea he was just giving me the perfect moment to begin the next chapter. In corporate America, they'll underestimate your gray hair until they realize it came with 20+ years of strategic thinking. And by then, you've already won the game they didn't know they were playing. The most dangerous employee isn't the one who storms out angry when they fire you. It's the one who smiles, packs quietly, and walks away with patents they spent 3 years preparing while you were busy cutting costs.